Looks like we have some breaking news coming out of the state of Georgia. So, what we know is there is a fight going on basically in all of the swing states right now for third party candidates to get onto the ballot. Republican groups are actually funding a lot of the efforts for Cornel West, for example, to actually get onto the ballots as well because these swing state elections are going to be so close. Even the tiniest of a margin could flip it, and we will kind of go over how these margins can come into play and how close they can get. But here we have the story. It says, Judge disqualifies Cornel West and Claudia de la Cruz from running for president in Georgia. So Claudia de la Cruz is running for as the Socialist candidate, the Socialist Party candidate. Cornel West is running as an independent. It says Georgia State Court judge have disqualified presidential candidates Cornel West and Claudia de la Cruz from running for president in the state. Presidential candidates Cornel West and Claudia de la Cruz are disqualified from running for president in Georgia. Two state court judges ruled Wednesday, saying that their electors didn't file the proper paperwork. For now, at least, the decision means votes for West and De La Cruz won't be counted in Georgia, even if their names remain on ballots because it's too late to remove them. Military and overseas ballots are scheduled to be mailed starting Tuesday. So I think the printing is supposed to start happening the 17th or something like that, I think, or the 19th maybe. But what's really interesting is, so based on this ruling, they're not actually going to be deleted from the ballot, but there's going to be a mass awareness campaign done to actually let people know that they're not actually valid votes, because I guess it's not going to actually be efficacious to even remove the names. So there's actually, I should have pulled up the article too, sorry about that, but there's chaos going around right now in North Carolina because they're not sure what to do because there's thousands of ballots right now that already have RFK's name on it, and so they're trying to figure out, okay, what do we do with Kennedy's name on here? Do we send it? Do we not? And originally a judge had actually ruled, before I had got to the Supreme Court, that the damage or harm that would be done by having to reprint the ballots and the cost of the state was not actually worth it, and so that's why they had actually ruled against RFK on that. But it looks like the Supreme Court has decided that he is not going to be on the ballot, which is going to make it really difficult to be able to win North Carolina because it is going to come within the smallest of a hair, and that is going to decide the election ultimately. So it will come into that, and we'll talk about how it's kind of conditional how these kinds of people are affected. It says Fulton County Superior Court judges Thomas A. Cox Jr. and Emily Richardson ordered the state to post notices in polling places warning that West and De La Cruz had been disqualified and that voters for them would be void if their names still appear, a common remedy in Georgia for late election changes. West has been running as an independent in Georgia. De La Cruz is the nominee for the Party of Socialism and Liberation, but technically qualified for the Georgia ballot as an independent. If the rulings stand, presidential choices for Georgia voters will include Republican Donald Trump, Democrat Kamala Harris, Libertarian Chase Oliver, and Green Party nominee Jill Stein, the most candidates since 2000. Chase Oliver, I think, is probably going to pull votes that are not much from Trump, but hopefully there's even the smallest of a net. If you can even just net like 0.2 out of that, if Oliver can 0.2 net away from Trump, I mean, man, it would be huge. But I think for the vast majority of the part for the Libertarian choice, I think it's going to be voters you're going to pick up who are not Trump voters. Whereas Kennedy, I do think there would be more people who were Trump voters than it would for Chase Oliver. But it can still help a little bit. Even if it's 0.1 or 0.2, it can be game-changing. Like, seriously game-changing, right? So, a huge situation here. And then Jill Stein is obviously going to take votes from Kamala Harris. And Joe Biden won the state by only 0.2% back in 2020. So what I meant by sort of the situation of like conditional, there's a sort of conditional impact of a third party. So for example, I would say in 2016 in Michigan, Hillary loses by, I think it was 0.23% in the state of Michigan. Jill Stein got like 1 point something percent or something like that. In that scenario, I do think if Jill Stein doesn't run, you actually win Michigan because you only need like 20% of her vote or of her percent to go towards you. It's like 20% of however much percent she had. And I think statistically that's just going to happen. Even if half the people stay home, you would just have to net that much of a victory, right? You just have to have 0.2 more of what the other person got, which she definitely would have gotten. So just by math, people are going to have that as their replacement. And it's not like all their voters are just these kinds of crazy people or whatever. There's a lot of people who are just, kind of feeling tired of the system or kind of, feel like nothing works. And so they would have that kind of a person as their second choice. So in this kind of a scenario, yes, it can make the difference. However, in like a state in like Pennsylvania or Wisconsin, I think in Pennsylvania it was impossible. Even with 100% of her vote, there was still no way for Hillary to win. But overall, I would say 2016 was Hillary's fault for losing, though. She sucks so bad, right? But even just kind of mathematically and looking at what would have happened, I think there's even the difference with conditional sort of behavior here. But I think Georgia will come within a whisker, if you will. that whisker could be cleared by those votes, and so that's why this is going to end up being just so unfathomably crucial. So it's going to get appealed to the Supreme Court. What's also a little bit confusing for me is, so this has been an ongoing process. So what we have is, we have this article on the 26th of August. It says, judge says 4 independent and third-party candidates should be kept off Georgia presidential ballots. So this is on the 26th. It says the judge ruled Monday that 4 independent and third-party candidates are ineligible to appear on the Georgia's presidential ballot, although the final decision will be up to Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger. So I'm not sure if this was an administrative law judge, and so you just kind of appoint them, and then they give you a finding or whatever, and then it was Raffensperger's choice to do it. Otherwise, if it's just his choice, I mean, presumably he's just going to overrule the judges anyways. But it looks like maybe just in this specific scenario that was the situation. Now, I guess the Supreme Court is going to be the one that decides. So if their ruling does stand, we have to kind of keep our eye out on how this is going to end up going at the end here, right? Because this is kind of where it's going to end up getting determined. If it ends up holding, right, in the Supreme Court, this would be a really, really huge deal. In addition here, we also have more news also coming out of Georgia, actually. So we have Georgia Fulton County Certification Challenge, Adams versus Fulton County Board of Elections and Registration. So the Trump campaign is actually already starting to try to steal the election. So there's a bunch of people on Georgia's election boards who are trying to use certification as the weapon of choice to steal the election. And Trump is already praising them and what they're doing. But there was a case that was actually filed that was trying to support the ability to be able to delay certification of the election results, to cast doubt on the election results, and it did get thrown out. So this case actually was dismissed. So this result got dismissed. It says on September 9, 2024, a judge dismissed this case without prejudice. Georgia election officials will continue to have a mandatory duty to certify election results. However, the only caveat is, I did look at the document. It does appear that it's just on some technical grounds. So the judge is basically saying you have to refile for a different motion or something like that. So it's going to be a vampire that doesn't come back. So I'm just kind of giving you updates as these things come out and they keep going forward. And I will kind of keep you updated on what's going on and what's kind of popping off here. But even when we take a look at sort of what the Georgia polls are saying and what they're looking like, we can always take a look here. So it looks like Trump in the aggregate in 538 has actually retaken the lead back. So she held the lead for basically a week here, but she's been getting pummeled with a bunch of polls here. So Active Vote has them even. Redfield has Trump up 2, but has Harris up 1 now. So there's a 3-point difference. What I think might actually be happening with that is North Carolina may actually be overestimating Kamala Harris's support because they actually overestimated Biden a little bit. And then what might be happening is in Georgia, she's getting underestimated. So I do think the polls are going to end up missing a lot of her support, but also, these kinds of polls like Patriot polling is +1 for Trump. Even the Insider Advantage poll is Harris +1. But there's really confusing numbers like the Quinnipiac numbers, who they're definitely a reputable pollster. I think the Florida Atlantic University poll is kind of off. Even their Florida polls, I think, are kind of off from the numbers. But it's weird because what we saw a sea of red here, and then all of a sudden it turned into a sea of blue of 4 different pollsters all having her in the lead. And so it's kind of weird what's happening right now. But again, she, has hit 50 in 3 polls, which is a really good sign. 4 of these polls, she actually hit 50%. She has more of these 49, so she's actually polling pretty strong. And I think she should really try to get to that marker of 50% in the head-to-head markers, or in the head-to-head matchups, because I think that marker is a really strong one. So, hopefully, the candidates are able to stay off the ballot, because then obviously it's going to be able to hopefully prevent Donald Trump from being able to win. It's unfortunate, I think, that they're even running in the first place here, but I'll keep you guys updated on the story. But as of right now, really great news for Kamala Harris in the state of Georgia.